Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, we are kicking off a new series on the channel where I preview the upcoming 2020-2021 NBA season for every NBA team. Yesterday, I came out with a video putting every team into a tier. The first tier was teams like the Bucks and Lakers. The second tier was teams like the Celtics and Heat. The third tier was teams like the Suns and the Hornets. The fourth tier was teams like the Pelicans and Timberwolves, and the fifth tier was teams like the Knicks and the Cavaliers. I'm going to be doing this in ascending order, so we're starting with the bottom tier teams and we're moving up towards the top tier. So in today's video, we are talking about the New York Knicks. But before I get too far into it, I want to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all the support that I've been getting lately on these videos, and I really hope to see that continue. Now, without further ado, let's start talking about the New York Knicks' upcoming 2020-2021 season. But first, before we can get into that too far, I want to talk about their offseason moves a little bit. In the draft, they started off with the 8th pick, the 27th pick, and the 38th pick. They were able to bundle the 38th pick and the 27th pick to move up to the 23rd pick, which they then flipped to the Timberwolves in exchange for the 25th and 33rd picks. However, obviously these are great moves. You had 27 and 38 and you changed that into 25 and 33. That's better value on 2 first-round picks. So that was a very nice set of maneuvers by new Knicks head of president of basketball operations, Leon Rose. However, the fact that they sold the 33rd overall pick then to the Clippers in exchange for a future second round pick that is not likely to be 33rd or better. You know, there's only 3 teams. Like, they would have to gamble that the Pistons, in whatever year they acquired that second round pick, are going to be one of the 3 worst teams in the NBA in order for that to have matching value with the second round pick that they just gave up. So I don't really agree with that trade. But overall, they did a nice job in the draft. They ended up using that 8th pick to draft Obi Toppin, and they used the 25th pick to draft Emmanuel Quickley, both of which are solid draft picks. Toppin was the number 1 guy on my board at this time for the Knicks. I made personal big boards for every team in the lottery, and for the Knicks, he was the only guy left he was the top guy left, besides maybe Danny Avdija. I would have considered Avdija there if I were the Knicks, but overall, I don't think that taking Toppin was a bad choice, so kudos to them for not screwing up that pick. And then with the 25th pick, taking Emmanuel Quickley was a bit of a reach, but he was a guy that I was really, really high on going into the draft, and he does fix a need for this team. They needed three-point shooting, and Quickley definitely adds that. He's one of the best three-point shooters in this entire draft class, and I think that was a nice add here for the Knicks. In free agency, they added 4 players: Alfred Payton, Austin Rivers, Alec Burks, and Nerlens Noel. All of these are decent signings, and they did a nice job of creating cap flexibility for the future by signing guys to short-term contracts, and also they signed guys that are going to be decent role players that they can utilize around their current young players that they hope will develop into all-stars. However, I think that there was a different type of role player that they could have targeted in free agency that would have helped them out a bit more than the guys they did sign. This team needed spacing, they needed three-point shooting, and with the exception of Alec Burks, none of those guys really does that. So, while they are good signings and they do create cap flexibility for the future, they also are not going to make this team better. I get that might not have been what the Knicks were hoping to do in this offseason, but you could have at least used this cap space to sign players that would fit with your core and made you a bit better. However, these are just grapes. They didn't screw up like they did in 2019. They signed players that are decent and are going to keep cap flexibility open for them moving forward. They also used trades in order to acquire more future assets. They gave up pretty much nothing in exchange for Ed Davis and a second-round pick from the Utah Jazz, because the Jazz were trying to free up cap space in order to sign Derek Favors. So in that trade, they got a second-round pick. They then were able to flip Davis over to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were looking for a backup big man, And in exchange, they acquired 2 former first-round picks in Jacob Evans and Amari Spellman, and they also got 2 more second-round picks. So they basically got 3 second-round picks for doing nothing. So that overall is good business by the Knicks, and for these reasons, I think that they had a solid offseason. Now, let's start talking about their roster and considering how good this team can really be in the 2020 season as currently constructed. It starts with the point guard position, and at the point guard spot, they have Elfrid Payton, Dennis Smith Jr., and Frank Ntilikina, if you still want to consider Frank a point guard. Elfrid Payton is a solid floor general. He's a good defensive player. He gets quite a few steals, which is still a valuable trait. He was the Knicks' primary starting point guard when he was healthy last season, and he made them significantly better when he was on the court. Actually made them a somewhat respectable team. I think they were 5 points better with him on the court than they were with him off the court. So overall, that makes a big difference, and he's a good player for them to keep around to help them try to win. He's also a pretty solid playmaker for the point guard position, so with the combination of defense and playmaking, that's a good complementary point guard. However, because he's a really bad shooter, he's probably best off as a backup point guard at this spot. So having him starting for the Knicks isn't terrible, but he does fill a stopgap until either one of the 2 young point guards that I'm about to talk about take a step forward and are able to fill in that role, or they draft a point guard in this upcoming 2021 NBA draft. Obviously, Cade Cunningham is the guy in that draft, so if they end up with the first pick, you could see Cade Cunningham taking over this point guard spot. Dennis Smith Jr. is the next guy they have at the point guard spot. He was one of the worst players in the NBA last year. Started off really promising with a really good rookie season for the Mavericks. He didn't shoot the ball very efficiently, but he was able to score, and he put up decent assist numbers. However, that's only come down since that rookie season. In his second year, the Mavs acquired Luka Doncic, so he didn't have the ball in his hands as much. That did not treat him well because he is not a good shooter and can't really space the floor. So they ended up shipping him off to the Knicks, who were hoping to acquire the guy that was like the 10th overall pick the season before and hope that they could see him regain the form of his rookie season. But it really didn't happen in that second year. In this third season, we saw him take another step back and become one of the worst players in the NBA. He can't shoot the ball efficiently. He's a poor defensive player, and he has turnover problems as well. At this point, if he can't turn his game around, he'll be out of the NBA within 2 seasons. Finally, we have Frank Ntilikina, who, in my opinion, is probably the most promising of these point guards. He's only in his 4th season, he's still considerably young, and he still has room to improve. He's one of the better defensive guards in the entire NBA, which is a big statement for a guy on his rookie contract, but Frankie does a good job on the defensive end of the floor, and that is super valuable. I also believe that his 3-point shot has a chance to come along. He started off his NBA career by shooting it in the 20s, and this past season it came up to around 32%. We also saw him shoot 86% from the free throw line. So for those reasons, I believe that there's a chance that this 3-point shot comes around and he becomes a really solid 3-and-D option from the point guard position. That is a valuable player and someone that is at best a low-tier starter and at worst a good backup point guard. So while it's not the value you wanted when you drafted Frank Ntilikina with the 8th pick, he still is going to be a good role player in the NBA, and he's definitely a keeper for this Knicks team. Moving over to the wing position, the most intriguing guy here is clearly R.J. Barrett, the 3rd overall pick in last season's draft. Barrett needs to improve his efficiency shooting the basketball, barely shot over 40% overall last season, shot around 32% from 3 and a mere 61% from the free throw line. Clearly that free throw needs to get better because he actually does a decent job of drawing fouls once he drives the lane, but he needs to be able to knock down the free throw more consistently as well as the three-pointer. If he can improve that shooting, that will go a long way towards making his game better. He also needs to iron out his turnover issues and improve his playmaking. But if all of those things can happen, I could see RJ Barrett reaching that all-star ceiling that the Knicks were hoping he had when they selected him 3rd overall in the 2019 draft. Austin Rivers is another, I guess, wing is where I'm treating him here, but he's really more of a combo guard who can play both the 1 and the 2. He's a good finisher at the rim for a point guard, a guy his size. He has a nice floater game in between, and that's about it. His playmaking needs to improve. That has been true for his entire career, and he still has not made marked improvements in the playmaking aspect of his game. So that's a big area that he needs to focus on and get better at if he wants to help this Knicks team to the fullest of his potential. He's a league average three-point shooter, so while he does space the floor adequately, it's not at the level it needs to be to really be a threat from the three-point line. And he's a poor defender as well. So overall, Austin Rivers is a decent signing just because of the spark he can give you off the bench, get you buckets, but overall, I'm not certain that they will be picking up his non-guaranteed contract for the next couple of seasons. Austin Rivers, fun player, but not exactly the guy you need on a rebuilding team like this. Emmanuel Quickley is a guy I talked about before, can really shoot it. Even though he's a smaller guy, he has a plus wingspan, which should allow him to guard at a decent level on the defensive end of the floor. However, he does need to prove that he can do anything else on offense besides shoot the 3. And in his past season at Kentucky, he had more turnovers than assists, which is not something that can continue at the NBA level if he wants to be an effective guard. However, due to the three-point shooting and defensive potential, I do think that this is a worthwhile pick at 25, and I can't hate on the Knicks for it. Jacob Evans is a guy that came over in that Ed Davis trade from the Timberwolves. He has been really, really bad in his couple seasons in the NBA, has not shown a whole lot, really not a good shooter, not great defensively. He was not worth that first-round pick that the Warriors used on him in the 2018 draft. And considering the fact that the Knicks have 16 players on this roster, and obviously you can only have 15 players moving into the season, I think that he's a very likely candidate to get cut. Alec Burks is probably my favorite of the free agents that the Knicks signed. He's actually someone that can space the floor well, shot the ball 38.5% from the three-point line last season, which is going to make him a really nice floor spacer for guys like RJ Barrett and Obi Toppin. Other than that, his defense is not very good. He can score the ball off the bounce a little bit and actually shoots the ball pretty well off of pull-up three-pointers. So this could be a guy that you see maybe lead the Knicks in scoring or at least be top 3 on the team in points per game. And he's going to make this team quite a bit better than any of the other free agent acquisitions due to his ability to space the floor. Kevin Knox is another wing for this team. I don't know much else to say. He was drafted 8th overall by the Knicks in 2018, and he has been essentially a bust. He can't score the ball efficiently. He's shown flashes, like there was a game where he had 31 points. There was a game where he had 15 rebounds. So he's shown flashes of reaching that potential that the Knicks saw in him when they took him 8th overall. But he's not a good defensive player. He can't shoot the ball very well. He has turnover problems. He's foul frequently on the defensive end of the floor. And overall, he's inching closer and closer towards being the B word. Bust. Unfortunate as it is. Reggie Bullock is a guy that they re-signed in this offseason. I think that was a decent move because he's a good floor spacer and reliable three-point shooter. That's really what this team needed, and keeping him around as a guy that was maybe their best shooter with the exception of Damian Dotson last season was a smart move. Iggy Brazdeikis is a young guy who I believe was on a 2-way last season. He's actually a pretty interesting player to me. I think that with everything we saw from him in his one season at Michigan, there's a chance that he develops into being a really solid NBA player. He actually can shoot the ball from the three-point line at a pretty good rate. I believe he shot it around 37% in his lone season at Michigan. He can score the ball well. He's not a good playmaker, and he needs to improve that aspect of his game if he wants to click as an NBA rotation guy. But I do think that there's a chance here, and if he can improve that playmaking as well as his defense, the Knicks might have found a diamond in the rough with Ignas Brazdeikis. Julius Randle kicks off the big man positions for the Knicks. He's a big bruiser, probably one of the 2 or 3 best players on the Knicks. Good finisher inside, but he really can't shoot the ball from the three-point line. Only a 27% three-point marking from last season. He doesn't take them very often either, so he's not much of a floor spacer for this team. He's not great on defense either, and he does not have much playmaking. So really what you're getting from Julius Randle is a bruising slasher who can finish at the rim, but really can't do a whole lot much else. And for that reason, Knicks fans are very, very unhappy with that signing and the stunt, and the way that it has stunted the growth of their young players like RJ Barrett, like Kevin Knox. Hopefully it won't stunt Obi Toppin's growth, because Obi has a chance to be a really, really solid NBA player. Now, I had a lot of questions on him going into the draft, and I had him much lower on my draft board than a lot of people did. I think I had him 12th or 13th. I think 12th. I moved him up past Sadiq Bey a couple days before the draft. But he has shown infinite offensive potential. He's super athletic. He's a really good finisher. He's going to be deadly in transition, and I think he's going to be a really good pick and roll big as well. But his defense isn't very good. He's not a great rim protector. He can't move his feet, so he really can't keep smaller guys in front of him. Overall, there's not a whole lot of defensive versatility with this guy. I think he's going to be able to guard 4s and 4s alone. I don't see him being a guy who can switch down and guard guys on the wing, and I don't think he's going to be able to switch up and bang in there with big guys in the post. So overall, I think that he's a lackluster defensive player, and I really think that his hip mobility is going to hurt him because he won't be able to slide his feet and keep smaller guys in front of him. However, I have heard that strength and conditioning systems at the NBA level can help guys like this figure out their hip mobility, improve in that aspect of their game, and become competent on the defensive end of the floor. So if you're a Knicks fan, that has to be the hope with Obi Toppin, and if he can figure that out, because of all the offensive stuff that he does so well, there's a chance that they may have gotten their franchise player. Finally, Omari Spellman rounds out the power forward position, and Spellman is actually another guy similar to Ignas Brazdeikis that intrigues me. I think that there's a chance he ends up being a real rotational player in the NBA due to what he profiles as, which is a stretch big who can play good defense. Obviously, those are valuable guys in the NBA. He hasn't really found a position yet. He's stuck somewhere between the 4 and the 5, but he shoots the 3 ball well, and he plays good defense. He's a good rim protector for a guy who's only 6'8". So overall, I think he'll work in the NBA, and I like the fact that the Knicks are able to bring him in, well, really only giving up a contract in Ed Davis. So good move by the Knicks there, and I think that he's a good young player and a guy that they should look to develop alongside the rest of their young core. At the center position, we have 2 guys that are almost the same player. Mitchell Robinson is obviously the younger of the 2, so he has much more potential. He led the NBA in field goal percentage this past season, also might have led it in true shooting percentage. I believe he did. So obviously, he's a great rim runner, finishes the ball really, really well at the basket. Actually, I think he might have set an NBA record for field goal percentage. Correct me on that if I'm wrong. But on the offensive end, great rim runner, really good at throwing down lobs, and that's the value you're getting from him on the offensive end. That, along with his ability to crash the offensive glass and pull in offensive rebounds, is also super valuable. On defense, he's a really good rim protector, really plus rebounder, and that's where the value comes from. Obviously, you can see the archetype of player that Mitchell Robinson is. On offense, rim running big man. On defense, rim protector, and overall good rebounder. However, the areas he needs to make it click is in his decision making on the defensive end of the floor. He tries to block every single shot, and it leads to him getting into immense foul trouble. Per 36 minutes over his career, he's averaged more than 3 blocks per game, which is terrific. However, per 36 minutes, he's averaged nearly 5 fouls per game. So, while he is the Knicks' best player probably when he's able to stay on the court, that staying on the court part of the question is not always great. And if he can stay out of foul trouble, he can be a high impact guy. But if he can't, that really limits the impact that he can have on a game. Nerlens Noel is pretty much the same player as Mitchell Robinson, just coming off the bench. Once again, solid rim runner. He's a good finisher in the lane, is going to set good screens for the guards on this team, and hopefully can establish a nice pick and roll game chemistry with those type of guys. On defense, once again, rim protection, fouls frequently, good rebounder though. You've got two guys that really can't space the floor at all from the center position, but are good offensive rebounders and decent rim protectors on defense. So, that's the Knicks. Overall, this team does have some good veteran players. I like the signing of Elfrid Payton, Alec Burks, and Nerlens Noel. I have some questions about the Austin Rivers signing, but overall, I do think that he's a valuable player, and he's on a pretty cheap contract that isn't even guaranteed in the future. So, the Knicks made good moves this offseason. They still have a lack of shooting, and that might hurt them in the development of their young players like R.J. Barrett, Obi Toppin, and Mitchell Robinson. But I do think that they took a step in the right direction by acquiring future assets and acquiring young players in exchange for contracts, and also keeping their cap flexibility open moving forward. This Knicks team, however, just isn't very good. There's not a whole lot of talent on this roster. They're still young and they have room to grow, but overall, I don't think that they're going to be very good this season. If I had to predict a win total, it's only a 72-game season. So in an 82-game season, I'd probably say they're about a 20-win team. So that means this year they're probably a 17 or 18-win team. So, yeah, the Knicks are not very good, but they are taking steps in the right direction. And I do think that they have gained some box office value with the acquisition through the draft of Obi Toppin. So, yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about the Knicks. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments how good you think the Knicks can be this season. Give me a win prediction. What is the Knicks record going to be for the 2020-2021 NBA season? I think that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.